Okay, a very, very warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us today. Um, my name is Ray Lavery, and on with me here I have the wonderful Jess Crooks. Between the pair of us, we run the London Trans Meetup Group and Trans Matters Worldwide. And we are doing an ongoing series of webinars where we are simply talking with topics that we think are very interesting to help people in the trans community or to help supporters in the trans community or supporting people in the trans community understand being transgender, and just to give you a place that is safe and frankly a bit of fun, because we always enjoy this. Now today we are super excited to be talking to the wonderful Yvy Deluca, and you can see her there with a massive big smile on her face. This wonderful lady, myself and Jess literally accosted in Brighton Pride in that wasn't even in the right order. Trans Pride Brighton, where Jess was shooting a wonderful film all about trans pride. And I saw this, I got chatting to this lovely lady as she was really concentrating on going up on stage to do her performance. But I was so like enamored with, all her wonderful makeup and how wonderful she was, that I told her I'd come and chat to her afterwards. And indeed I did. And turns out I was dead right, because she's absolutely wonderful. And we are delighted to have her with us here today. Um, Evie, maybe the best thing to do is if I just get you to introduce yourself. Maybe there's people here who don't know you, so that they kind of get a good sense of who you are, and I guess why we're all here today. So I'll open the floor to you.
Absolutely. I mean, firstly, let me just introduce Nisa. This is my beautiful daughter. She will be popping up on this because she wants to have her shine. So, yeah, she's very happy to be here with her mom. So, hi, everyone. I'm Yvy Deluca. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a South Asian trans drag artist, writer, and performer. Um, I transitioned in the late 90s and early 2000s, and then I wrote a book about that in 2019 called Tainted Beauty, the memoir of an authentic creation, which told my story from a really honest and open perspective of what it was like to grow up in a Muslim community and how I was able to kind of work through my transition at that time, but also talking about it in a really honest way. Following that, I then became a performer and became a drag monster known as the Bolly Witch back in 2019. That's basically me creating Bollywood horror drag, which is very niche and very fun. And since then, I've been able to really build up as a drag artist around the UK. I've performed internationally as well. And then I also created my own cabaret here in Manchester called Apocalypse Cabaret, with a hyphen between POC. See what I did there? Which platforms queer artists of color who do want to perform alternative drag, burlesque, spoken word, anything like that that could be seen as kind of monster, horror, spooky, all year round. And it's been a huge hit here in Manchester. And just recently, on the 18th of August, I released my second book with my publisher called Evolved, the memoir of a tainted beauty, which is a sequel to Tainted Beauty and really continues my journey and delves even deeper into what my experiences were like, transitioning and evolving into who I am. And here we are today.
Yes, indeed. And also, not only are you all those things, but you actually also work as a support worker within transgender healthcare as well, which I also loved.
I do, yeah. So I work as a care navigator for Indigo Gender Service here in Manchester.
Brilliant. That's it. We love it when there's some of us actually on the other side of the fence helping us. That's very helpful.
That's right.
So
So it's nice to be able to kind of like take a lot of what I do and everything kind of connects with each other, which is really, really great, both
yeah,
externally and visually and also behind the scenes.
yeah, brilliant. I love it. Now, one of the things that sort of captured me when I saw it, first of all, I was mesmerized because your performance was fantastic, and you're such a warm, open person. You're so amazing. So I just couldn't wait to delve into your book, and we will talk about your book a little later on. But what I was going to say to you was that one of the things that struck me, there's a lot of people who look like me, who are white, who have either an Irish or an English accent, whatever, but it's very less usual to see people who don't have my skin color. And so that gives you a very different experience. And that was one of the things that I guess when I was talking to you, I was like, oh, I'd really love to touch on the subject if that's okay with you, because you've got a double whammy in there. So okay, coming from Manchester, we will forgive you for that. That's fine. Actually, Blackburn, wasn't it, where you actually came
I'm
from? But living,
originally from Blackburn, yeah, but
yeah,
I've lived in Salford for many years
well,
now.
we will forgive you for both of those. Okay, now I came from Dublin, so listen, there's actually
I
forgiveness
don't
there.
forgive
But
myself for living in Blackburn. Let's just say that.
I think it taught you to be very tough.
It did.
It has a lot taught you to be very tough, which is very necessary in this game. But what you also are is obviously you're an Indian lady who has grown up in an Indian family where, let's be honest, things are a little bit tougher for somebody who is transgender. And just to put the icing on the trans cake, you also coming from a Muslim community, which
Yeah.
makes it where essentially they're like, transgender doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's not like, I mean, in Indian uh, culture, of course, you have the Hijra and you have people like that. But when you actually get down to Muslim, it's like, no, computer says no. So, what was it like for you growing up in that environment? Like, how did it feel? How did you survive in that?
I mean, it was incredibly tough. I went through my school years in the early mid 90s, and growing up in Blackburn, it is predominantly an Asian community. Um, and what I found was a sense of loneliness within my own community. What was happening was I was being ridiculed by my own community just because they thought that I might be gay or use Asian slurs to refer to me rather than even calling me by my name, my dead name. And it was really lonely because I thought to myself, if this is how people see me, if this is how my own people, my own community see me, just because this is what they think that I am, imagine what they're going to do when they actually find out who I am. And at that time, in the 90s, there was no smartphones, there was no social media, there was no access to information like that. So I didn't know that there was a word for how I was feeling, but I had no one to even speak to. Even when I went to my GP to talk about my feelings about my sexuality, and this was when I was about maybe 12 or 13 years old. And I was just told that, you don't want to do that. You don't want to you don't want to disgrace your family. Just stick to playing football and hanging out with your brother more because that will cure you. And that's coming from my GP, who was Asian. And uh, that really scared me because I'm thinking if that's what professionals are saying in my own community, then I haven't got a chance. So as a result, I had to find out a lot of things by myself and hide a lot of who I was from my community, from my own family. Even when I started transitioning, I transitioned at home in Blackburn without my brother and my sister even knowing, and traveling to Manchester to work and, changing my clothes and all that kind of stuff. Because as soon as I realized, this is how I can be myself, I was unstoppable and I couldn't even wait to move to Manchester. I had to just start because I had been living in such hell for so long. I needed to kind of like break through that. And it's a shame really, because even when I was younger in Blackburn, the kind of the racism that I encountered and the homophobia and the transphobia that I encountered were predominantly from the Muslim community. And it was very hurtful for me at that time because I didn't know why. Like, why am I being treated like this? I'm one of you. We should all be together. And it didn't feel that way at all. It felt very lonely. And I always feel there's a huge difference between being alone and being lonely. And that experience really taught me how to retreat in a way where if I if I if people don't know that I exist, if I retreat so much that people completely forget that I exist, that's the safest place I can be because no one knows that I'm there. And that was my defense mechanism, um, which I learned many years later is very unhealthy. But at the same time, it was my coping mechanism to get me through those years. But it was tough. It was really, really tough to get through what I had to get through. And I know that there are a lot of people in the Muslim community or a lot of Muslims that are struggling with that now, which is why I'm not afraid to be outspoken about what my experiences were and know that you actually do have people to talk to, because I would have loved to have had that when I was younger.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. I mean, when you're talking there about feeling lonely and feeling that you're going to let your family down and that you're going to be ostracized, I think pretty much all of us feel that. We all think that our world is going to come to an end the second we admit this to anybody. And it's one of the hardest things to actually do is to take that step. First of all, to admit it to yourself, because you are your worst critic, right? You're
Yeah.
the one who's going to give yourself the hardest time and create the most amount of torture in your head. But if you actually think, like for me coming out, for example, in my family, which is really liberal, they just kind of went,
Yeah.
all right,
It's difficult as well because, like,
yeah,
for me, like, the first person I came out to was my mom, and my mom is very liberal. My mom's very progressive, but at the same time, we were very much in a community that was steeped in tradition, in religion, in kind of family morals within, within kind of like the Muslim community. And it's really hard to break away from that. Even when, my mom might have had like the best intentions, sometimes it's kind of like I always had to put other people first. What is this person going to say? What is that person going to say? Even when I moved away from Blackburn, my mom was the one who said, you should leave. And at first I thought that it was because she didn't want me anymore. But what she meant was, is don't stay here because you're not going to be happy here. Like, why stay here for people that just don't accept you, don't want to kind of be around you, and it'll do is make you unhappy? Why don't you go and be happy? Even though it killed her to say that because she did not want me to leave, because I was her youngest. But she knew that if I stayed, all it will do was just tear me apart when all she wanted was the best for me. And I knew that was like a really tough thing. But even she knew that our community will all they'll do is just give me hell as time went on, which is what they'd already done in the first place. And that's why I left. And it was like a very scary thing, but I knew that I was doing the right thing for me. And I knew that I had
yeah.
my mom behind me anyway. So no matter what happened, I knew that I'd have her love.
But well, and aren't you lucky that that happened? That your mum basically said, well done, because, and actually a comment has just come in here because essentially we know what we're going to do long before we do anything, right? We've been struggling with this stuff for years. But then when you tell your closest and your nearest and your dearest, let's be honest, for the most part, they haven't had a minute to even consider this. To them, it's never been on their radar. And, my family still needed a lot of, TLC and education, but that's doubly so for your mum. So, how did you help her along with this?
I was just really honest. Like I write in my book, I was very open with myself when I was younger. When I was 3 years old, I was putting jumpers on my head to pretend it was my long hair. And I always asked my mum, why didn't you stop me from doing that? Or did you ever think to do that? And she just said no. She goes, I knew that you were just being yourself. I didn't know what it meant, or anything like that in the 80s. But, I was just letting you be yourself. And that was it. And I said, that is the best thing that you could have done for me, is just let me be me. And one of the big things that my mom kind of says to me now, especially when she read my first book, she was just really upset. And she just said, why didn't you tell me all these things that you were going through in high school and college and all that kind of stuff? And I said, Mom, the world, everything around me was telling me, you are not right. You are not, that you're not supposed to be here. And I did not want to risk that with you. I did not want to be disowned. I did not want to lose you in any way. So I was so worried that that's what was going to happen. And it hurt her feelings that, I couldn't open up to her. But she also got really angry at the people around me that caused me to be that way. Which is why, like, when I started my transition, she was with me I mean, and this was back in the like early 2000s. So there was no like easy option. I had to go down to Charing Cross every single time for an appointment, no
Mm.
video calls. And she came with me to every single appointment. We'd go down to London. We did a massive happy dance when I finally got my hormones and all that kind of stuff. She was there with me the entire way. So to me, it's like, even though I didn't have a very good relationship with my dad's side, and my relationship with my brother was quite difficult, I always had my mom. Even when I was living in Chorlton by myself, and and all that kind of stuff, she was there. But I also wanted to kind of like build up my independence and build up my strength. Um, but really, I didn't need to do too much work in terms of like helping my mum out. My mum was there every step of the way, so she saw like everything
Mm.
that was happening. She saw me at every single appointment and shopping for clothes, this is that and the other. Even after I had my lower surgery and with dilating and all that kind of stuff, I go into so much detail about like what my mum was, like during that time and everything. There was never anything that I hid from my mum because I see her as Zora as well as my mother. Like, I don't just see her as like the role that she plays in my life. I also see her as the strong woman that she is because that's where I get it from. Like, I get my strength from her. So I like to kind of like see her as Zora, this amazing, amazing person who was able to understand me even when I didn't understand me, even when she didn't understand me. She goes, it doesn't matter whether I understand or not. All I know is this is you.
Mm.
And who am I to stand in your way from being who you want to be? And she's had that mindset her entire life since I was like 3 years old, and
Sounds good.
I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, she sounds amazing. I mean, reading the book, she is amazing for standing up like that. Now, can I ask a question about your mum? Not one of the ones that we talked about, but um, did your mum have to explain to your community where you were or what was going on? Like, was she your front line, or did you talk to them?
She wasn't, no. So I did all of that, because my mom was very, very supportive, but she didn't really need to like speak to the community because my family as well, like they weren't like we weren't like the most popular with people because we were so progressive in terms of how we were and how my mom treated us. Like even when it comes to religion, my mom taught us the ways of Islam and what it means to be Muslim. But she said to all three of us, me, my brother, and my sister, that I can teach you, but it's your choice whether you want to be Muslim. It's your choice whether you want to follow a religion. It shouldn't be something that you are born into. It should be something that you make the choice to kind of like adopt as a way of living. And a lot of people didn't really understand that and everything like that. But I'm really grateful that my mom did that because it gave me a choice to understand how I want to navigate through my life. So when it comes to kind of like me as a person, she didn't really need to do any talking because by the time I was really getting into kind of like my transition, I'd already left Blackburn. So the people in Blackburn just thought I'd left. And the people who didn't know who I was didn't even care. So it was only when my first book came out, because my mum was quite nervous about that because she kind of, like I said, you're putting a lot out there because she was the first person to read it. And she's like, Yvy, are you sure you want to say all this stuff? And I'm like, yeah. Um, but she was a little bit nervous, especially with like my partner, with writing a book, you're putting a lot of information. Are you going to be okay with that? But it was my way of reclaiming that power. But once I did that, I said, look, mum, now no one has anything to gossip about because you're not learning anything about me that I haven't put out there. And she then saw like the power in that. So when like family members or people would come up to her and go, oh, we saw that Yvy like wrote this, she's like, yeah, and what else do you have to say? Nothing.
But that means they all bought it, right?
Exactly. It doesn't hurt my royalty.
Excellent. Making some money out of the Muslim
Exactly,
community.
exactly. But,
Fantastic. Yeah.
but either way, regardless of whether, she spoke up at times and didn't speak up, she's always been like a massive supporter, and that's all I could really ask for at the time.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Because you sort of internalize transition so much that it is that bombshell moment. But I think what I sort of learned sort of going through it was, you get that moment of why didn't you tell me from your parents? And it, for me at least, it was like I didn't think I really had the words to describe that. Like hindsight is 2020, right? Like I think it's a great thing to get it down in a book and to tell people afterwards. But when you get that reaction, it is that case of I don't think I could have told you that at any time other than now. I don't think like you have to be ready yourself, don't you?
Absolutely. And, sometimes you don't really know how to put things in words at the time when you're going through it. Everything feels very much life and death. And I was going through quite a lot of stuff. And when I was away from Blackburn, it was in some ways a huge release because I was away from a town that knew who I was, like knew my history. Whereas when I came to Manchester, and when I also lived in Morecambe as well, it's like no one knew me. So it was like a blank slate. So it was kind of a trade-off where I just thought, okay, well, I'm going through these things. They're really, really tough, but the alternative is to go back to a place that I really don't want to go back to. So you know what? I'm just gonna endure like what I'm going through and not tell my mom or not really go into it because I know the first thing my mom will say is come home. And it's like, no, I can't. I just can't. I can't do it. So that's just kind of like where I was. But I knew that regardless, she was always there. And we've had a great relationship all the way up to now.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
And the rest of your family as well. So you have a brother and a sister now, and your sister is a ferocious protector of you and always has been since like warding off the bullies in school and stuff like that. Fair play to have a sister like that. Like that's
Yeah.
awesome, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. So like
So
Firoz and my sister, yeah, she's the oldest of the three of us. And yeah, she was very much you don't mess with her. Like and everything like that. You just don't. Even when like, again, I didn't really like speak to her about how I was feeling. If she saw people like coming at me and I was the insecure kind of I don't want to cause any ripples. She would be the ripple. She would be the one causing it. Because she just didn't care because she didn't like that. And with my brother, obviously at the time, we would share a room, but we were such different people that we never lived in each other's world. So we didn't really like build that kind of sibling connection really because he was kind of doing his own thing with his friends and I was over here just wanting to not be acknowledged as much as I could. So that's it's very different now. But when I started to transition, I could tell that it was something that he wasn't really understanding and everything like that. And again, people's opinions, community, all that comes into play. But I obviously left Blackburn and it took many many years for us to really get a proper relationship, which we do have now. But again, it was a long journey to get there.
right. I think a lot of siblings would say that.
Yeah.
In fairness, in fairness. Okay. So look, I know that if, by the way, lovely people, if you don't know the book, it's called Tainted Beauty. That is the first book by even her second one is evolved, which we will talk about in a little second. But um, I mean, I just finished reading the first one, and I have to say, a lot of what you went through is a very familiar story, with how a lot of us attack this. When I say attack this, because there's only one way. If you go gently down this road, you're kind of in trouble. You kind of need to grab the bull by the horns and just go for it. And whatever happens, happens. And certainly a lot of us, particularly at that transitiony stage where you don't really pass in either world. It's I think one of the most difficult ones. The first most difficult one is saying it, admitting to yourself and getting it out there. But then there's a whole lot of people going, but you don't look like that. How do you know? And all of this kind of stuff. And then the people, when they're being mean and nasty, it's at this particular stage. And I think a lot of us have come across that. I do think that trans women probably get a lot more than trans men. Um, just because for some reason you're a target and easy to pick on, and everybody's masculinity is in jeopardy if a trans woman walks past them. And I don't really understand how people have to be that insecure for that. But it's a big one. But what you went through and the length of time, one of the things that I loved about it is that it was kind of like a 5 or 6 year period from start to finish, right? And
Yeah.
even then, once you do, which sounds like a regular timeline to me, right? Your cat seems to agree with that. It seems
Yeah.
like a regular timeline to use that 5 or 6 years. But that's when your journey really begins. So you kind of did all of this physical stuff and the change and the hormones and the moving here and the moving there and trying relationships and not being ready for it. And which again sounds very familiar in a lot of things. The bit that I wasn't expecting is once you'd finished your transition, you went off the deep end.
Yeah.
You went drinking madly. You started introducing more and more drugs into your system. You ended
Yeah.
up not knowing where you were, getting yourself in trouble, don't even know what happened those nights and whatever. And I wasn't expecting that twist. I really wasn't. So what happened that you like usually when most people are like are in that stage where they now pass, they're like, oh my God, that's a relief. Grand. Now let's move on with regular life. But you just went off a cliff. Like what happened? Because you don't really go into why
It,
there.
it was tough, and I think for me, what happened is that, growing up in a Muslim community, you're very much told that, or kind of expected really, to live this heteronormative, by the time you get to a certain point, you need to meet a man, you need to be married, you have to have children, all that kind of traditional style thing. And when I had my lower surgery, and I was able to kind of like move forward, and with at this time we're talking maybe 2000, and by the time 2008, 2009. All I really wanted was to just kind of live this ideal heteronormative lifestyle where I could just move forward, not worry about anything, and just kind of do that. But what happened is I ended up going into a relationship with a person who didn't know that I was trans. So I hid everything. I hid my dilating. I hid, the issues that I was having at the time. Going to appointments, this is that and the other. I moved to Morecambe for him, and it ended up being an absolute nightmare. But really kind of like what really happened with all of that is I leapt into a relationship, a heteronormative relationship, and didn't even take the time to process the fact that I've actually reached a point in my life where I've reached a goal that I was hoping to get to. And I haven't even had the time to form that relationship with myself, or form my relationship with, because even throughout all of that, I had never met another openly trans person. I hadn't really done anything like that whatsoever. It was all on my own. And I always look inward for how to feel or how to act or how to behave, just as Yvy. But when I got to where I was like hoping to get to, the relationship that I had just really ate at me and took away so much of me that I hadn't even had a chance to develop, to embrace. Like I said to my mum, when I had my gender surgery, I was a virgin again in every way possible. And the world, it was like someone pressed reset at 22 and everything was brand new. But I had to act like I had 22 years of experience of this, is that, and the other, and was with a man who had no idea, and he had expectations and I had to fulfill them. And I didn't realize just how damaging that was, to not develop my relationship with myself before just delving into giving myself to somebody else. And what happened is I was hollowed out and gave and gave and gave and gave to please someone else. And in the end, that person ended up being this really toxic person. We ended, and I was left empty. I was left this hollow shell, and I was so disappointed in myself, because I thought, you worked so hard to get to where I am, and only to do this to yourself. And I hated feeling that way. And I didn't know how else to stop that constant reminder other than having sex, drinking, and then introducing drugs into my life. And it was my way of just running away from what I needed to deal with. But I knew that was only temporary, and it had to stop. um so that's kind of like where that all came from. It was about kind of derailing from my journey, because I thought that, yes, a straight cis white man wants me for his girlfriend. Amazing, job done, happy ever after. No, it was just that was not what needed to happen whatsoever. But I learned from that. And those 2.5 years were incredibly tough, but it really, I learned a massive lesson there, which was like Samantha Jones says in Sex and the City, you know, I can love you, but I will always love me more, regardless. I don't care who you are. Even now, with my current husband, I say current husband like I've had loads, my only husband. We've been married for 8 years and I love him dearly, but there will never be a day where I will love him more than I love me. I will always put myself first. And that was because of the previous relationships that I've had where I've always put someone else first, and I've seen the damage that can happen. I've worked way, so I'm trying not to swear. I've worked way too hard to be me. Even now, being married, I'm always going to be Yvy Deluca. I've worked too hard to be Yvy Deluca, and I'm not about to give it up for no man. And that's kind of like what happened there, and that's why things got derailed so much. And even though it was very dark times, and I'm glad that I wrote about it, and I was really honest about it, because, like I write in my first book, if you can learn something from everything that you've gone through, whether it's a week later, a month later, a few years later, if you can learn something from the experiences that you've had in life, then you don't have to regret anything. Like, it was meant to happen if it meant you've learned something that has made you stronger now.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, again, like the pressing reset and starting from scratch, 100%. I think we all feel that because we're now in a brand new world that nobody gave us a manual for, and we haven't had the formative years to figure it out. So we're learning the man rules and the women rules and the non-binary rules as we sort of go along, which are different. The world treats you very differently. So you need to get your I guess, your head around that. That takes time. So the strategy that you use pre-transition and during transition is to just disappear from those that would cause you harm and to shrink into yourself. And the smaller you made yourself and the less conspicuous you made yourself, the more protected that you would be. That's a double-edged sword, that one, because certainly some people took advantage of that. But for this one, because this sounds like the complete opposite, where it's not a question of you making yourself small, it's that question of making you big. So what did you actually do to get yourself past that jumping off a cliff stage to actually putting yourself first?
I think it was when I had a very scary experience, um, which I wrote about. I was on a night out. You know, it was like the kind of that the usual thing that I was doing, meeting up with the guy that I was sleeping with at the time. He had a lot of drugs, and I mixed it all with alcohol, all that kind of stuff, you know. And we're in Canal Street, and all of a sudden I came to, like, maybe 2 3 hours later, I had completely blacked out and I had bruises all over me. Even my friend blacked out. We had no idea where we were. Like, things, like my phone was missing. So many things were gone, and it was really scary to think that, like, I literally cannot remember what happened to me. Anything could have happened. And when I got home, I didn't have my house keys. I had to get my landlord to let me back into my flat. He was worried about me. And I was stood, like, I had a shower and I was stood in front of the mirror. And I write about it as well, where I'm just looking at my naked body. And I just kind of like felt this like calming moment of like, is this the route you want to go down? Is this the journey? Is this your journey? Like, where do you think this road is going to lead you? Because right now it's not leading you anywhere good. So if you continue down it, are you going to find what you're looking for? No, you're not. You're just not. You're not going to do that. And I had to like have a very frank conversation with myself. Basically, I had to bitch slap myself and say, listen, like, this is not for you. You know that this is not for you. And you need to kind of really reevaluate what you need to do. And what I always say is, we all have one existence, but it doesn't mean that you can't be reborn over and over again. So maybe the reason why you're so unhappy and the reason why you are living like this is because you're living a version of yourself that you don't want to be anymore, that you don't need to be anymore. You're still living in that version of yourself that you were when you were in that toxic relationship. You're not in that anymore. So what are you doing? Now you're trying to fill it with something else that wants to harm you. Well, you already let go of one thing. What you need to do now is go forward into the unknown. Turn the page, new chapter. Is it scary to delve into the unknown? Absolutely. but is it worth it compared to what you're going through right now? Absolutely. So that's kind of like where I see myself even now. If I find myself hating my job, hating this, all everything is making me unhappy, I'm in a state of depression or anything like that, I sometimes have to stop myself and go, okay, what is going on in your life right now? Or is it that there's external factors, or are you kind of moving, are you transitioning into a different version of yourself and you're leaving that version of yourself behind because you don't need to be her anymore? Now it's time to be this newer version of Yvy and kind of move forward. And that was one of those moments where I realized, like, yeah, I'm holding on to a version of myself that I don't need to be anymore because I'm too scared to let go of that pain because I don't know what's on the other side. Um, and it took something really scary like that to kind of go, okay, well, we know this is when it kind of ended safely, even though it was a horrible thing that happened to me. I mean, a million and one things could have happened as a result of me blacking out for 3 hours. God knows why. I don't even want to think about what the possibilities could have been. But instead, I took that moment and said, I'm going to leave this version of me behind because she doesn't make me happy. I'm not happy. So I want to move forward and delve into the newer version of me that I have no idea will work out. I have no idea where it'll take me, but it has to be better than what I'm doing now, because right now I was living in a hell, but now I'm creating my own hell. That's
Yeah.
that's what was happening.
Self-inflicted pain.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
now
So
you
what did you actually do? I mean, it's wonderful to have that realization, and it's also wonderful to have that realization before things go too far. And for instance, you lose your house, you lose your job, and that, like, oh my God, like that's a whole different level of mess out there. But was that the point where you decided, right, I need to embrace my queerness, my transiness, if you like? It was that point where you let your where you allowed yourself to love you as you are, not how the world was supposed to, how the world saw you from the outside. Is that a good? I
yeah.
don't know if I put that the right way, but
Yeah, it was. And like when I met my husband, well, he was my boyfriend at the time, when I met Jack, he was again a cis straight white man who had no idea that I was trans and nothing like that. But I had a different mindset, and I was, learning about me and taking things at my own pace. And then I told him, like 3 years into our relationship, that I was trans. Actually, I told him 9 months before our wedding day. That's when I told him. So he proposed to me. And by that point, we were together for like 3.5 years, something like that. Um, I said yes because we were in Rome. Like, how could you not say yes in Rome? And it was at that point that I started to kind of feel a certain way about him, because I always said to Jack, what you've gone through in your life before me, that's your business. And if you want to share it with me, that's completely fine. But if you don't want to share any of that with me, that's also completely fine, because who am I to judge you of what you've gone through? Unless you're out there axe murdering people, that's a completely different thing. But like, if who am I to judge you on that? But when he proposed to me, I realized that actually I don't want to like stand there on my wedding day knowing that I'm keeping something from him that I'm not ashamed of. I just want to just live my life without having to like explain myself to everyone all the time. Um, and when I told them, uh, like months before our wedding day, that was like one of the toughest things that I could have done. And I was very much prepared for him to bolt. Um, but it was right for me to do it when I did it. And if he did leave, I would have understood that and I would have respected that, because I'm not going to allow him to take anything from me. Like, I'm not going to let him take away my confidence and my journey and the importance and beauty of that. If he did, I would have respected it, and that would have been it. But thankfully, he was so understanding and said, I didn't think that I could love you more, but I do. And everything makes so much sense now, where your strength comes from, where your resilience comes from. And I can't wait for you to be my wife. And it was one of the most beautiful moments I could have asked for. And on my wedding day, even though like a lot of people, like his family, this and the other, didn't have any idea, but he knew. So like the person on my wedding day that I was marrying, he knew that everything about me. I wasn't holding anything back. And shortly after that was when he was kind of the one who said, you've been talking about wanting to talk about your story and what you've gone through, and I wanted to start writing a blog. And he was the one who was like a supporter of me and says, I don't care what people say. I'm proud of you and everything like that. And that's like where, like, I honestly feel that Jack came into my life when I was ready to receive him. Like I felt like I needed to learn something really important about myself, like a reminder of how strong I am. And then he came along, and we have, I always say we have nothing in common except each other. Like I adore that he is his own person, and so am I. And he is so supportive of everything that I do, but he's not above me. Like he's not my happy ever after. He's not my, like, he's not that. He's very much like, you know what, you are here because I am a strong woman and I've gone through a lot, and I'm ready to receive a person like you because I deserve you and you deserve me. You know what I mean? Because he's gone through some stuff as well. And that's kind of like how I see it. And because I have that mindset now, it makes me feel so much better, because the previous relationship, I only wanted it because of the status symbol it gave me. And I was petrified of losing it. So I would do anything for him. I would please him in any way that I could, because I was afraid of losing him, because I felt that I would have been lesser if I wasn't in that kind of relationship. And that was so toxic. But I learned so much from that. And I didn't carry that into this relationship. And thank God I didn't.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. And I'm glad you said that you are the person for each other and that you both support each other. And frankly, good husband. Well done. He sounds like a top-notch guy.
Really.
It's absolutely wonderful. So, and because I mean, honestly, when you were like, when I read in the book that you hadn't, you hadn't told him, and like, oh, but they're getting married very, very, very soon. Like maybe this should,
I can
like,
see where this is
hopefully this comes up. But yeah, you did, and it worked out really well, which is amazing. So for you, then, I mean, there's been a lot of like the transition. It happened, done, dusted, and then there was the reclaiming or the claiming of who you are as a woman, as a person, and that's the bit that I also absolutely love. And I know that you go into that more in your second book, I think, than the first book. But you started to get involved in the trans community. You started to go and do events. You started to put your hand up and say, "This is me," and what's going on here. What was that like for you, having literally done your entire transition completely on your own, and after you finished transitioning, going, right, now I'm going to talk to some other transgender people. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like the opposite way to how most people do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest, at the very beginning, it was pretty tough, because I mean, I write about one instance in my first book, and how I completely appreciate that it's, entering a trans space, it needs to be kind of safe, and people can be on guard and on the defense and everything like that. And even when I went to a community center in Sholton, and a lot of people there thought that I was cis, so were treating me very oddly, kind of interrogating me, thinking that I was infiltrating the space that I wasn't supposed to be in. And then when they found out that I was trans, their demeanor and everything completely changed. Um, and it was interesting to kind of come at that, because I wasn't quite sure, like, do I need to look a certain way? Because again, I always just said I want to just look like Yvy. I don't, not Yvy the trans person type of thing. So I wasn't quite sure why I was coming at that. But then a part of me thought, well, why else would I be here? So it might have been naive on my perspective. It might be that there are a lot of people who try and infiltrate those spaces to try and, you know, do harm.
There are.
So I completely understand that now. But at the time, I wasn't quite sure why I was being treated that way. But since then, I have found that when I enter kind of spaces that are for trans people, especially when I, start volunteering for the LGBT Foundation and stuff like that, when I went to Trans Pride Brighton for the first time back in 2019, it's really interesting, because I didn't realize it at the time that I've become that person who is like a bit of a fountain of knowledge, because I've gone through it. So when I meet trans people now, even in my job, it's very much like I can kind of impart some support and some wisdom onto people that I didn't have when I was younger. And when I kind of entered the trans community shortly after I transitioned, and when I was in a toxic relationship at the time, because I was trying to like connect with the community, I just found it very, very difficult because I didn't know how I could just be myself with people, because the people that I was encountering were very much on the defense. So it was hard to open up to people or what I could do. So I just felt like, oh, okay, well, I'll just stick with being on my own a little bit longer, until I'm able to speak to a bit more, speak more with people, or feel a little bit more confident and everything like that. But now it's fantastic because I'm able to speak to so many people, whether they're people who have gone through everything that they've gone through, just starting the transition. It's really nice to be able to open up to people or let people know that they can with me. And that started with writing my books, because I just kind of felt like if I want people to feel comfortable and open up and feel comfortable talking about their stories, well, maybe I should start, and maybe I should start with my story and be really, really open and honest about it. And that's kind of opened a lot of doors for people to approach me about what they're going through, and build connections.
Yeah, it's that not feeling alone, even if you don't know a person, but if you even read a story where you go, oh, that's happening to me, or I feel like that, or,
Yeah.
not only is it just nice to know that you're not the only person on the planet that's going through this, because you often feel like you're the only person on the planet who's going through this, but it also gives you a role model of like, okay, yeah, it's here, and yes, this stuff happens, but then you get there, and then like there's hope, there's light at the end of the tunnel,
Yeah.
when you see that, and it's really nice. And sometimes you think you're the only one who's really struggling, but then you find out everybody is struggling and that we're all pretty much in the same boat. And yes, some of us have a little bit of an easier journey, but we torture ourselves significantly more than anybody in the outside world ever tortures us. And that's a huge thing. So I love how you got it out there and started to write your book. So can we talk a little bit about your books now? Because you've got two, not just one, you've got two. You
I
decided to
do.
put yourself through it twice.
I do. So my first book, Tainted Beauty, um, that came out in 2019, and that's very much a kind of a linear story of like what I went through, what my experiences were like growing up in the community that I grew up in, how I discovered my identity and how I kind of navigated through that. But I'm very, very honest with it. Like even my mum was just like, when she read the book for the first time, she was just like, I'm only on chapter one, Yvy, and it's filthy. And I'm like, well, I turned out fine, and like I'm in my 30s, so I've kind of like done some stuff. So but I wanted to be really honest. Like I didn't want to write about like this is what gender reassignment surgery is. It's like, listen, you can read about that kind of stuff in plenty of like texts and all that kind of stuff. I want to write about real stuff. Like I want to write about what it was like afterwards. Like I said to my mum once, like, what chapter are you on? She's like, so I'm on the chapter where the guy is like pleasuring you down there with his mouth. I'm like, oh, okay. And when you're thinking, it's not feeling very nice, and you're not quite sure whether it's you or whether he's just really crap. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, I just want to let you know it's because he's crap. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks, mom. Oh, it wasn't me then. So it's
I
just so,
literally love your mother.
yeah.
I
So
love
it's
your
like I was really, really, I'm very honest with my first book, because I feel like that is like I wanted people to go away with more answers than questions. And then my second book, which came out just under 2 weeks ago, called Evolved with a Y. See what I did there? That is it's a little bit different to my first one, because like my first one is very linear, like from start to finish, whereas my second book is kind of 7 short stories all about different parts of my life. You learn more about my mom, you learn a lot about my relationship with my husband, how my experiences with religion led to me being a practicing witch, and how I became the Bolly Witch, and how that encompasses my heritage and everything like that. And my second book really, I think it really delves into the unconscious. So my first book is very much the conscious journey that I went through. My second book is about all those memories that you have that seem insignificant, but stick with you so vividly that you can relive it for some reason, whether they're good or bad. And I always thought to myself, like, why is it that, there are certain memories that you're like, oh my God, I can't remember what I ate last night, but I can remember this that happened in 1982. It's like, why is that? And I realize it's because there's something there that you have not learned yet. There's a lesson in that memory that you need to learn from. Like, there's something. That's why it's sticking with you so much. And I delve into that so deeply in my second book, because all these different memories that crop up, there's something there that I just haven't tapped into just yet in the unconscious that's now coming to the forefront because I'm forcing it out of me as I'm writing. And it was very, very therapeutic for me to kind of like get through a lot of that stuff, especially when it comes to, the experiences of me in Manchester, a continuation of stories from my first book. Like I say, my relationship with my mom and what her experiences were like with me, and what my husband's experiences are like with me, and having those difficult conversations, but also having those really open conversations without worrying that it's going to turn into confrontation. Um, and also, it's very witchy, all about what my experiences of being a practicing witch for the past 20 odd years, and how the Bolly Witch was my way of reclaiming being a witch and being a South Asian person and being a trans person, and saying, I don't need to choose. I don't have to be Indian or gay. I don't have to be Muslim or trans. I can be both, and I can create some beautiful art, put it on stage, and force the world to experience it. And you're going to love it. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what I kind of like talk about and how I became the Bolly Witch. So it's like there's loads of different things, and it's beautifully illustrated by an amazing South Asian woman in London who created the art. So it's just like it's such a beautiful way for me to kind of tell my story.
Well, it's absolutely amazing, and I love it because you've gone from being somebody who was in the spotlight who didn't want to be in the spotlight whatsoever
No,
for quite a number of years, really about 20 years, where you were in a spotlight you didn't want to be, to going, I'm getting in the spotlight.
yeah,
I'm going to jump right in there, and I'm going to reclaim everything about my heritage, about where I've come from, and I'm going to turn it into my version of me and my life. Now, I can't think of anything more powerful than that.
yeah.
Really.
It's for me, it's just like the magic of like being a trans person and knowing that there's so much power behind it, if you just let it in and not let kind of the outside influences kind of take away from that. And the reason why I called my first book Tainted Beauty is because I truly believe that what people perceive as tainted is actually the very thing that makes you beautiful. So don't let anyone take that away from you, because actually you're not tainted. Actually, it's the beautiful things about you that people either don't understand or choose to not understand, and then try and convince you that those beautiful things about you are wrong when actually they're not. And that's what my kind of journey and all the experiences taught me. And that's what I truly believe that. And that's what I say to people.
And fantastic. And really, how you were on stage, great performance, by the way, in Trans Pride, right? And I loved it. I was very much transfixed. You
That's
had the
how
whole
it's
crowd.
family friendly as well. That's my family friendly Bollywood.
Oh,
When
really? Yeah,
it,
I've seen some of your videos.
yeah,
You'll go out there a bit. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
quite a range. Yeah,
Yeah. But the thing is like you went from that very shy little person in school, really having a tough time, to this powerhouse of confidence.
yeah,
And that's the thing. And I think it's once we reclaim our confidence that we really start to be who we are,
yeah,
not because of permission from anybody else, but it's the permission we give ourselves to
yeah.
be who we are. And I
And
think that's the most powerful thing to be.
yeah, and I always say that, when you come into this world, your energy has shifted the world. So you're meant to be here. And your energy is exactly that, it's yours. And if someone else puts their negative energy onto you, don't confuse yourself and claim that as your own. That's their energy. It's not yours. So what they want is they want you to claim that for yourself, so it starts to infect you and affect you. What you need to do is filter it out your system, which is not easy. It still happens to me at times where I have a chink in my arm and someone just manages to get in, and you'd get angry. Like, how can you, insignificant person, affect me like that? And you have to filter it out your system by telling yourself this is not yours to keep. Yes, it's affected you. You might have been upset about something, but okay, feel it. Don't ignore it. Feel it and filter it out your system and get back on track, because that's not your energy. Like, it's just not. Give it back or just get rid of it, and remember to reclaim what is absolutely yours and put that out into the world, because no one can take that from you. No one can take your energy from you, but you can claim other people's negative energy if they put that on you, if you allow it to.
You
So
can also give your energy away,
yeah,
which
and
is
it's
also
like,
the thing that you, yeah,
and I've done that as well, you know. And if you do give your energy away and someone takes advantage of that, that speaks on their character, not yours. You are not
yeah,
the person. You are not the person that's wrong. You're you know, you are a good person, and if you wish to give your energy to someone, that's completely fine, and you don't know what they're going to do with it. It might work out well, it might not work out well. I've been on both sides. I've given it to someone who took advantage, and I've given it to someone who I've still been with for 12 years and nourishes me just as much as I nourish him. You know, you can't, like Dorothy says in the Golden Girls, if if you do something new, sometimes good things happen, sometimes bad things happen, but if you don't do anything, nothing happens. So just remember to, if as long as you're confident and comfortable and strong within yourself, whatever you do with your energy, the repercussions and like the reactions, they're going to be there. But embrace it and enjoy being you, because then no matter what happens, good or bad, you are confident in yourself, and there's always a lesson to
yeah.
learn in everything that you do, and you can always move forward because you're a very
Amazing.
person.
I mean, and that is exactly it. And that confidence builds up slowly over time. You don't just suddenly powerhouse. Like it takes years. And I think we need to realize that that journey is a little step, but over time it works. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? That's the way that it works.
That's right.
Exactly. Yvy, I have to say thank you so much for being here with today. But can you tell us, please, for those, because now it's the people who are on YouTube, because Jess has been very good putting the links to your book in the chat. So those people are grand. But for people listening to this on YouTube, how do they get through to you to buy your book? Where do they go? What give us the links if you know them
Yeah.
all.
So my books are available on all major book retailers: Waterstones, Amazon, WH Smith. So you can buy them from any major independent bookstores online. But if you want to support trans writers, you can actually go directly to my website, which is www.yvyworld.com, which is yvyworld.com. And if you just click on store, you can actually buy them directly from me, which there'll be signed copies. You get some free goodies, and you're helping out trans writers and not just, giving money to Amazon. But again, if you want to give money, if you want to do that, that's completely fine. But yeah, you can absolutely go to yvyworld.com, and you can buy the book directly from me, and the links are in there as well.
Fantastic. And just in case you missed that, look in the description below. Look at the description because we put everything there. It's easy. It's not really a secret. You know that this happens on YouTube. Look in the description. So
That's
it's
it.
all there. Great. Okay. Yvy, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your incredible story. By the way, there have been comments all the way through this, people going, one, kudos to your mom, very inspirational story. There's somebody who works with you, basically you are their care worker. They bloody love you. And there's very amazing comments coming down here, and we can see that because just by listening to you, you are fantastic. I am a major fan, and I can't wait to read your second book. So thank you so much for coming on here, and I have to say the best of luck with the books, the best of luck with everything that you're doing. We, as friends of yours, will be keeping a close eye, and we'll give you all the shout outs that you want to help you along that path. And look, like I said, guys, if you want to get through to Yvy, if you want to buy her book, you have all the information now. And also thank you to you guys for coming on this, for coming live, for being here exactly when you were supposed to be. So for those of you watching on YouTube, for this showing up exactly when you needed to hear it. And thank you for watching us. And so please enjoy yourself, whatever you're doing for the rest of your day, evening, night. And until next time, take care, everybody. Cheers and goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
See you later.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
lovelies.
Bye.